Welcome back to another episode of the Empowered Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories, along with practical tools and actionable insights that can help guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have an awesome guest with us. Her name is Talya Pardo. She's a
Part.
certified anger management specialist, a soul coach, and founder of Phoenix Rising. She helps individuals transform anger into a source of power, guiding them to develop emotional intelligence, resilience, and healthier relationships. Talia specializes in understanding the emotional needs of both men and women, helping clients navigate feminine and masculine dynamics with greater clarity and compassion. Her no nonsense, heart centered approach empowers others to rise from their emotional challenges and create lasting inner change. And so, without further ado, Talia, I want to welcome you onto the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited because I remember meeting you in the pre-interview, and we had a lot in common as far as our anger journeys have taken us. And I think it's a very beautiful part of life that is just very misunderstood in society. And I love that. I'm gonna let you share your story here in a second, but I love that your story puts you on this path to better understand the gifts that were hidden behind your anger and how you're now out
Mm.
there helping other people discover that same aspect to their life.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really very personal to me. It's been something that I've struggled with so much, and as I learned how to better understand myself and heal myself, I was really feeling called to help others, especially because anger is something that a lot of us don't really want to talk about necessarily. We can often feel a lot of shame around our behavior when we're angry or the anger that we harbor inside of us. So it's really one of those emotions that tends to be protected by a big shell that, maybe deflects into other emotions or manifests in other ways. But it's really important to call it out and address it and own it as the best way to start healing, I think.
Yeah, and I think that, something I've learned about anger on my own journey is that there's a part of us when we do get angry that our needs are not being met. And that's something people don't talk about ever. Funny story. People see anger as this big negative thing, like, don't talk about it, don't act like that, don't be that. We find all sorts of excuses and reasons to not be angry, but I think we deny ourselves the ability to listen within when we act that way towards our anger. And so I've learned that anger really is, in a lot of ways, a need of ours not being met, whether that's being seen or heard or understood. It could also, by the way, be a part of us that loves us the most.
I think it actually is the part of us that loves us the most, right? It's wired into all of us, and it's even with, anger management, which the term is the common term, but it's, I don't know, sometimes doesn't feel the right term for it because it's something I'll never say that like working with your anger you'll be able to eliminate it and you'll never feel angry again. That's never going to happen. It's actually quite a protective mechanism that we're all wired with because like you said, it's there to highlight unmet needs, things that we don't even necessarily realize, and it's only once we try to look underneath that anger that we can recognize what those needs might be. We might not even be aware of it. We're just holding the anger and not understanding what it's trying to protect us from: pain, grief, um, trespass of boundaries, all those lovely emotional things that we deal with in our life. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that's why it's so important for me to talk about it and to help people bring it to light because it's the last thing we should be ashamed of.
It really is. I wish people would be less ashamed of their anger and more supportive of themselves in that moment. Because I think there's so much to. I always say anger is one of those moments of life where we have gifts, lessons, and blessings within it. And if we were to see anger in that light instead of, like you said, about managing it or trying to push it under the rug, we would learn a lot more from it. And I think we would be a lot more calmer of a society in that aspect.
Yeah, and by working with it, you can actually ease so much of your own suffering, right? I mean, there is ways that we can express anger that can be very unhealthy, and that's where the management or the relearning and the rewiring of our behaviors and how we cope with those feelings come into play. But learning all of those tools doesn't mean you're trying to eliminate the anger. You're just looking for a healthier way to express it that will bring deeper connection with in your relationships and with yourself rather than causing destruction, which, and, destroying trust and, it, rather than that, that's what we're looking to do.
So Talia, tell me a little bit about your backstory you shared with me in the pre-interview with our
Mhm.
listeners today, because I know there's a beautiful journey you went on that led you to this point of being able to coach people through their anger. I'd love for you to share that story with us.
Thank you. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. So for me, I mean, anger has always been a part of my world, it seems. I grew up in a very angry household, where, healthy communication was not on the list at all. I don't know that any of us knew what that even meant. It was just a lot of explosions, no real repair afterwards. Everybody was unhappy, walking around, harboring this anger and kind of lashing out. And that's what I learned. And anger is also a learned behavior in terms of how we express it. So I went into my life that way. In my first marriage, that was a big part of it. It was a very volatile marriage. My ex-husband was, his anger was extremely explosive. And when you're in relationships, it's also kind of normal and it's very protective almost to take on the negative behaviors of the person that you're with. So my anger only escalated and the way I behaved about it only escalated to kind of match his, throughout the time we were together. And then we had kids and, then I was a mother and overwhelmed and very, very, very stressed. It was not a good time. And I really didn't have much of an awareness of it. I just knew that like that was how it happened. I would yell, I would scream. And then as I had my kids and then subsequently divorced and was a single mother and I was one-on-one with them with no one around, I found myself, using those same learned behaviors on my kids. And not having any of the tools to understand it, I also didn't, it would be, it's their fault that I got mad. They did this, that made me mad. I lost it. A lot of in the parent world, it's like I lost my shit on my kids, things like that. Um, and as things, progressed, as they started to get a bit older, I always felt bad after because I was very prone to intense rages and I would berate and kind of really just make everybody feel bad around me. And then kind of once that physical, flush of anger would subside, I'd feel very remorseful and shameful and I'd try to repair with them. And as they got older, I started to see that it was harder to repair with them. They would pull away more, but also, especially my older one, I would kind of start to get that behavior back at me. And that was one of those, kind of clinching moments where I started to go like, oh, like that, that sounds familiar. Where'd she get that? Oh, she got that from me. And it played into my guilt and my shame, and I really started to feel like I'm trapped in this cycle. I can't seem to stop it when it starts. I'm repeating these scripts of saying the same thing, even if it's not even related to what set me off. It was these same angry lines. And that's when I started my own healing journey. And it didn't even necessarily start with focusing on the anger. I knew I needed to help myself some way. I was just so unhappy. And with that work that I was doing and the awareness building of like these outbursts are so bad. They're so harmful. They disrupt the day. My kids are unhappy. That was really starting to become a big motivator for me of like, I do not want this for my kids. It hurts me to see them hurting. And I'm the cause of it because I exploded on them. Whatever the reasons were, they weren't putting on their shoes or whatever, they were fighting. Like it just created such an atmosphere in the house. And so, I kind of went on my way and started to work on myself and really started to try to find tools. And my first tool, in working with the anger was really just breathing, just like trying to just breathe out instead of lashing out with them. And it even got to the point where the kids would start to tell me, Mommy, stop your hawing, because I would just go, and they'd be like, stop hawing. And I'd be like, well, I'm really trying not to yell right now. So this is the best I can do. That was really my first step with addressing my anger directly and how I expressed it with them, because that was my biggest motivator. I wanted things to be good for them. I love my kids so much. I want them to be happy. I want them to feel good about themselves. And I didn't want to be an additional cause of their pain amongst the rest of everything else that was going on, because the post-divorce life was very volatile as well. So, of everybody. If mommy isn't a safe place for them, then they have nothing, you know. And so I really recognize that deep in my heart, and that was been my really biggest motivator. And then, life kept progressing, and I was working very hard, and kind of right around COVID, like I think for everybody in different ways, like life just changed, stopped, like, people changed jobs, whatever. So I left my job abruptly, and I had a year at home trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I went into editing. It's like maybe I was a librarian before, tried to start editing, and I just kind of felt like I had been working so hard on myself, and I'd learned so much that I really wanted to try to give back and find a way to help others, because I knew the shame I carried and the grief that I was carrying around my past behavior, and how I had been able to already see changes in my kids with the changes I had made. I started to be able to pull back at the very least and not explode, and come back to them after, or say things a bit more calmly, and I was seeing a positive result with that. So I decided to go into life coaching. I did my certificate in life coaching, and I kind of meandered with that, and then I realized I needed to focus on something, and I chose anger because it really was still something I was working with, and had been such a big part of me for all of my life. And so I dove into that. I got certified in anger management, and I really feel very strongly that it's almost kind of everything comes back to anger and what's beneath it. And that's the root cause. Because so it covers such a wide range of everything in our lives that it taps it taps everything. And so when I say I'm an anger management specialist, yes, we could deal with anger and what happens to your body, and the tools that you can use to relearn your communication skills and how to cope with the feelings that you have and to better understand yourself. But it's also still a big part of general personal growth and healing. So that's where I am now.
Well, I love that story that you just shared because it really shows a testament to your commitment to grow as a person. And I love that you were aware enough, by the way, which is where I see a lot of people fall short in life at times, is we're not always cognizantly aware of our surroundings. And I love the story that you
Mm.
shared about seeing yourself reflected back to you and your children. Your children were showing it back to you. And I've always said that other people are a mirror of what's going on inside you, believe it or not. And that's a really, I've struggled with that concept personally in my own life, so I'm saying it's easier said than done. But sometimes the response you get from other people can be a reflection of what's going on within. And so it's another opportunity for us to really look at ourselves and examine, how we feel, or maybe there's something we're not paying attention to.
Yeah.
I love that that kind of made you, in a lot of ways, shift course and really made you aware. That's what I really like about that is it made you aware
Thank
of
you.
here's an opportunity for me to grow again, and this is trying to tell me something about myself. Um, I wanted to
Yeah.
ask
It
you a
really.
question about what you brought up about anger management. How do you
Mm.
feel about the term management versus
Yeah.
awareness?
I think awareness is more accurate or authentic. Management also, I feel like it implies that there's something about you that needs to be controlled. And it's really not about control, or suppression. It starts with that awareness and learning, of course, and rewiring and practice and repetition. So, yeah, awareness, I feel like, is a more authentic and an accurate term. Management is just, it's the term that's more commonly used.
So I always get this connotation when I hear like management of something, or when people say they're trying to control or manage their emotions, and I almost laugh because I say that these things are invisible. I mean, I can't hold
Yeah.
anger. I can't touch it. I can't feel it. I can't manipulate it like Play-Doh. It's a feeling. It's an emotion. It's always something trying to tell us something.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it also doesn't address how much radical self-honesty and responsibility comes into play when we're talking about anger and the awareness of it and the feelings that fuel it. Because it's a big part, and it takes a lot of courage, right? Most people shy away from facing themselves or taking ownership for their own part in, the relationships, the dynamics that they have with others. And that that's a really crucial piece of the pie. If you aren't prepared to be honest with yourself, and take responsibility for both your feelings and how you express them, you're not really going to get so far, in your growth, I think. And that's yeah, I think that's kind of where I came to it too, right? It started with so much grief and shame and remorse around my behavior once I kind of was really able to start seeing these patterns. And in the aftermath of all the explosions, I would just kind of go over it and be like, "Oh my God, I feel so bad. This is terrible. I'm a terrible person." But I guess something inside me took that, and I still have my days where I struggle with it. Like if I can fall into sometimes a pity party, right? Um, but something inside me took me from there to, okay, then, if that's who I like, that's what I did. That's what I did. Where do I go from here? What do I have to do to shift it into something more positive, into something healthier for both me and my family? And that's where the honesty and the responsibility come in.
Well, I think that's a big thing to talk about in anger is
Hmm.
that guilt and the shame and the grief
Yeah.
behind it. And
Yeah.
something that I was watching a TV show the other night and I saw somebody get explosively angry, and I don't know why they
Mm.
did, by the way. They were dealing with a narcissistic personality in front of them, and I understand. I've dealt with that kind of abuse in my life, so I know what that's like to be on that end and get pushed. And
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought up the topic of grief and shame around anger, because I do know that when we reach our limit and we get very angry and we get very upset, we almost turn into somebody that's not even us. It's like a whole different person in that moment.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people don't ever take the time to take that next step after the grief and the shame or the guilt and actually look at that situation from an observation standpoint, an observer.
Yeah.
And I was going to share a personal quick story since you brought it up. I had a moment in my life where I had a lot of those moments happen with my in-laws. I just couldn't
Mm.
stand what was going on, and I get turned into that person I didn't like. And at one day when the anger boiled over, at some point, something went flat in me. Like the anger just like fell right from the sky, and I sat there and said, "Okay, I'm gonna blame myself right now." And it's a weird concept, but I'm gonna blame
Mm.
myself right now. And I started asking myself these questions. I said, "Did you put yourself in this situation? Did you tolerate and allow that behavior? Did
Yes.
you did you get talked into it? Did you just make a choice for other people and not you? Did you know
Mm.
better, by the way? Did something
Yeah.
inside you, a little inkling inside you say, this doesn't feel right. I shouldn't
Yeah.
be here. If I am here, by the way, it's probably going to go there." I wasn't listening to those things inside me at all. And
Mm.
what I learned when I reflected back on these moments was I had tolerated and allowed situations to happen, and I put myself there. And this is
Mm.
a really hard part about anger, by the way. I talk about it's easy to blame other people. It is very hard to
Exactly.
go within and blame
Yeah.
yourself. It's really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Um, it's something I learned from a Tony Robbins Netflix. I'm not your guru. He said if
I
you're gonna
love that one.
blame
Yeah, it's great.
you love that? He
Yeah.
had this phrase in the show about if you're gonna blame people for all the shit they do, you better blame them for all the good they do too. And what I did is I use that in grief coaching a lot, and I also use it in
Mm.
anger a lot too to say, if you can look within and say, I put myself there. Nobody forced me to be a part of this situation. I chose to be a part of it. You can then take that ownership you were talking about a few minutes ago, and you can say, I get to make the choice next time not to do that, not to participate in that. I know what's going to happen if I'm in that situation.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you acknowledge your anger. You acknowledge it and you give it space.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how you make it empowering, right? And that's when we talk about boundaries and understanding needs and expectations and things like that. The thing that's we all have to be very careful about too is when we go into that blame, the self-blame, I would almost reframe it as taking ownership, right? That observation, because that self-blame cycle of, oh, look what I did, and I feel so bad and it's my fault and all of that, that almost can perpetuate your anger cycles because it doesn't allow you to see where your choices led you. And it doesn't allow you to take ownership. It just keeps you in the same state and in a frankly negative emotional place, right? So that as the situation continues or perpetuates, you're already even you it builds because you tend to be more primed because you're stuck and you're frustrated and you're resentful, and that just feeds into anger, and and kind of reach your limit faster, and we're all human. It's like you're never not gonna be angry or get caught up in it. It happens, but when you keep yourself in those places and that aren't beneficial for you, or that are too compromising, you're just maintaining your anger cycle, really.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on that. And that's why I always use these phrases too, and I help people go through anger a lot, which I do
Yeah,
subsequently in
sure.
grief, is I always try
Yeah.
to say, don't say you are angry. You're not.
Mhm.
I don't care who you are, by the way. If you feel angry, you have that emotion, but you are
Yeah.
not that emotion. Don't identify with it. That's a
Yeah.
big place I try to help people see. When you say the words I am angry, you
Hmm.
embed that thing inside yourself. And now you will become that, by the way, because you identified it. But if you
You're
say in
priming.
turn
Yeah.
of I feel this way, or I think, or it looks like, or it sounds like, now you're just describing the emotion. So now you're actually allowing yourself to hear yourself, to feel yourself, and that's where you can get into that power place. And I love the way you said that about self blame, because I do think that's a dangerous game to play with self blame when you say, "Oh, I shouldn't
Yeah.
have done that," or "I shouldn't have said that," or "Oh, I overreacted." Well, there's things beyond that that happened. By the way, you're just
Yeah.
describing a moment, but you're not really fully understanding what even led you there in that place.
Right. Right. And sometimes also trying to understand the other person's, not just their part in it towards you, but where they're coming from, so that you can better understand their reactions and say, okay, well, they're coming from it this place. I understand, not that we're excusing their behavior or, what they've said or whatever, but we can understand how we both got there. And I want to really acknowledge it. I mean, you sound like an amazing coach. I love talking to you, but when you say, not making it your identity and saying like, I feel angry, that's part of what when I talk about beginning the anger awareness is really just being the observer, right, of what's going on inside you. It's not even like you can't even start by trying to stop it. You have to really start by just going like, okay, wow, I'm feeling so angry. And yeah, I yelled, or yeah, I exploded, but like this is what was going on inside me at the time. And I see it and I feel it. And if I can walk away or if I can do that, that's great. And I'm just going to let that feeling be there and try to let it and sit with it, and then I can better understand it once it starts to maybe calm itself. Like that's where the phoenix, metaphor for me comes from, because I used to feel like I was, this idea of the phoenix kind of burning up, and being reborn from its own ashes. I was in a state for many years where I wasn't being reborn yet. I was just sitting in the flames, and I just felt like I would, share with my friends, and I would write to them and be like, I am burning in the flames right now. I'm sitting in this bonfire of crazy emotions, and I don't know what to do with myself. I'm just trying so hard not to, let it out or be the middle of the night or whatever. And I recognize that sitting with that feeling, like you said, knowing this is what I'm feeling now, observing it is really such a fundamental, stepping stone into the rest of the process.
What were some major turning points for you when you were
Mm.
sitting there in the flames? Because I know it's a very uncomfortable
Mm.
place in a lot of ways, and it's always like you're searching for something but can't find it. What were some turning points for you in that moment?
Oh, that's a good question. So it was years where like things kind of became a blur, but I think what started to happen, I would at first kind of vent about blaming the kids, my ex, whatever the situation was. And as the time would go on, I would start to recognize like, okay, I jumped because at the moment I was really stressed in my head, and something came at me and I lashed out in the moment. Like those little processes of trying to better understand what was happening for me at the moment and acknowledging it was really the start of my deeper understanding of the anger, and just also acknowledging, well, for me at that time, life was so overwhelming and stressful, was to just go like, I am always overwhelmed. I'm always primed to explode because nothing feels good right now and I'm stressed to the max. So kind of holding that space for myself and the compassion that comes in was really important to start to shift it out of the remorse and the self-blame into the awareness and going, like, okay, so there's something other than just me being pissed off because my kids fought or whatever happened, you know. Um, it was a slow process. Like it was happened over time, so but those were key moments, I think.
I really like that for you because that's where, a lot of us live in a very instant gratification world today. We live in this very fast paced, I gotta have it now thing. And when
Hmm.
I think that contributes a lot to people's anger today because when we don't,
Sure.
again, get our needs met and get it met fast enough in today's world of things, all of a sudden it's like, boom, I'm throwing a temper tantrum because I didn't get my way thing. And
Yeah.
we don't always take that pause for 5 seconds to say, this may not be life or death right now. This may not even matter in the next 2 hours. And it's okay if I have to wait 5 seconds. It's okay if I got to wait a
Yeah.
minute. It's not going to kill me. I think
Oh,
that
yeah.
the way society is right now, we've just inbred this instant gratification piece, and I think that that has caused a lot of impatience and a lot of fuel behind people's anger. And I
Yeah.
really am curious to know, what are your thoughts on that, where society is today in that capacity, and what can we do to better manage that in our life?
Well, I think you're right. We've become also very reactive society, very outraged. Everything is something to be outraged about. And giving ourselves the space and to understand that sometimes, progress or growth happens when there's nothing happening, when you allow nothing to be, or you give yourself just the like, okay, I know that's there. I'm going to let that sit for a while. And our subconscious is always working on it too, right? And we don't have the patience. Like you said, it's an instant gratification. It's also the lack of deeper self-awareness because, we say unmet needs. Sometimes we're not aware of what those needs are at all. We just know we get mad. And it's also unknown expectations around things, So sometimes even for me, I have to remind myself of that sometimes where, I wanted my kids to like remember to put things in the dishwasher and they're still not doing it. But have I told them recently that I want this to be done or, reminded them about it? No, I haven't. So I have my expectations as I kind of walk around the house. I have issues around like everybody doing their chores, which is normal for anybody, I think. But, I recognize, well, those are expectations I'm holding around for them. I'm also giving those expectations meaning because then I'm saying, well, you're not doing it. So that means you don't respect me, or that means you don't want to listen to me. And that means this and this and this. And then that builds into something that can then be, easily triggered into an angry outburst. But if I'm clear about what I want from somebody, which means I have to be aware of that and speak it and communicate about it, then that expectation is clear, or I can then find a way to understand like it's not the end of the world if the glass doesn't go in the dishwasher or whatever. I'm picking trivial examples, but it kind of applies across the board. If I'm not aware of it, I'm not speaking it, then an unmet expectation is or an unmet need is a perfect fuel for that fire. And in this world, like you said, people are also much more individualistic, much more impatient. Everything is instant gratification. And so we're not even taking the time to understand that, I think.
Well, I think that's where I wish, and I love that you said growth happens when nothing's happening. I really do. As much as that drives me nuts in my own personal life of things, it really is true that, you can only push so hard and so fast on something before it just is not going to work. And I do believe in a lot of ways, as you go through life that when you try to push or force something, it's usually not meant to be, and it somehow will fall apart or get worse, whatever way it will, in front of you until you realize that I've got to stop pushing. I've got to stop trying to
Yep.
force this thing. Um,
Yeah.
and that's why I think instant gratification, especially in the world today, it really
Yeah.
does lead to anger. It does, and I think
For
that
sure.
like you said, it puts us in a very hyper reactive state. I've always tried to share, because one of the big things I learned about on my own anger journey is there's a big difference between reaction and responding. There's a big difference
For
between them.
sure.
I always tell people reaction is like in the moment, exactly how you feel. It's going to come out in whatever raw, intense state that it comes out in, but it may not always be the warranted one. It may not
Yeah.
always be. It's okay for you to feel that, by the way. Not going to tell you you can't. But I'm also going to say, too, that you have a choice on how you want to respond. And so, if you happen to be like at the grocery store, for example, and you're just pushing up on somebody in the line because you want to get out the door faster, well, we're all limited by the cashier and how fast they can get people out. We're all limited by it. So your frustration, sadly, is everyone else's at that point. And so
Yeah.
I use this example a lot when I share with people. If you start taking that out on other people, whatever way, you're reacting to something. But if you sit there and say, I'm here just like everybody else, and I'm going to get out here just as fast as everybody else, you're allowing yourself to respond to that by understanding that there's things that are outside your control at this point. You just can't control it. And that's okay. I
Yeah.
was going to bring that up for a reason. I wanted to ask you, how does it play into anger management with understanding the concept that there's things out of our control and things
Mm.
within our control?
Oh, I actually just had this conversation with a friend of mine about focusing on that. Um, well, it's just about surrendering, I think, to it, right? It's when we focus on those things that are without outside our control, it's like you said, you're pushing on a wall that's not going to move because you're nothing you do is going to change what's going on because it's not in your control. But if you take that focus and energy and understand almost like that Venn diagram, right? Like what overlaps, what's outside my control, what's in my control, and what can I do about it? Um, it rechannels your energy into something productive, at least, or something that you can empower yourself around. And then maybe you can actually make those small impacts or influences to positively shift things for yourself so that either maybe the external factors aren't so either negative or influential, or you can find some kind of peace and positive benefit and empowerment within what you are able to control. You know, it's we you touched on so many other points before when you were talking that it all comes together and that like what the in control and out control thing brings up the word surrender for me because it really is a matter of surrendering to, like you said, even the grocery store can't get past the cashier. I got to surrender to this is the situation. I've got to let it be what it is and choose where I'm going to funnel my energy. Because the next question also is if I get mad and start yelling or start pushing and saying, like, hurry up, where's the positive outcome for me here? I'm going to piss everybody else around me off. The cashier's not going to be happy with me. I'm going to make them feel bad. And at the end of the day, I'm still going to get to the cash and get out, maybe even slower than I did because the cashier might decide that, well, now I'm not going to even try to go fast. Whatever, there's no positive outcome from trying to push against something that's out of your control rather than surrendering. And you're going to walk out feeling frustrated and mad and riled up, where you can walk out feeling like, okay, all right, that took longer than I really wanted to, and I'm a little frustrated. But like, all right, and you can move on with your day and then release it a lot easier than you making a scene, right, and pushing against it hard, and you walk out completely riled up, and it will most likely color the rest of your day. And you'll probably call a few people too and go like, what happened at the grocery store, blah, 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 right? So you're spreading more negativity for yourself and others rather than, just allowing things to flow. And, sometimes I find when I do things like that, almost, lovely little things can happen. There can be somebody that I haven't seen in a while who ends up next to me in line who I have a chance to catch up with while I'm standing around and waiting. Like those kind of like, or like I noticed something that I forgot to buy and now because the line isn't moving, I have time to run back into the store, like into the aisles and go pick it up because no, the line's not moving that fast. Little things like that can make or break, I guess, how the rest of your day goes and your experience of it.
Well, that's I had a moment of I think it was like last month. I was trying to cross a busy street and like nobody would stop, even with the cross lights
Mm.
going, and I was getting frustrated. I was like, guys, seriously, like calm down, stop, just slow down for a second. And I eventually just like walked out in the street because I just said, forget it. I gotta go. And
Take your
anyway, the
chance.
best part is I must have looked like frustrated or something because this sweet old lady in her 70s, she was walking on the sidewalk on the other side of the street. And she just turns and looks at me with a smile and she goes, they don't stop, do they? And I laughed because I was like, you know what? That is so true. And I ended up having a conversation with her, just some random lady. I never met her before in my life, but it put a smile on my face after that. So I always, to your point, when you said that when we hold on to that anger in those moments and we will miss opportunities, there is nothing positive that will come out of it. But to
Yeah.
your point, like you said about running, you might run into a friend. I ran into a nice lady that totally understood where I was coming from.
Right. And like
So,
help you almost release the tension of your frustration of having had to wait and no, like it just changed shifts the mood for you for that experience and you can move on with your day.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you too, how, when you look back on this journey that you've been on, and you've done a lot of work, I can tell, learning to understand what angers try to communicate to you. How has it impacted and changed your life to this point? If you were to look back at yourself 5 years ago, for example, and compare yourself to today, what are some of the big takeaways you've gotten from that experience?
Well, definite way more self-awareness and understanding of myself. I have a mind that always wants to know, like you can call it curiosity or whatever, scientific. Like I just need to know. I want to understand everything as far deep as I can get. So I've gained so much self-awareness. But the best thing I can say is my relationship with my kids is like night and day. They're older now, they're teenagers, and they're wonderful girls. And what I've seen now is our relationship is really healed so much. First of all, their anger and how they express it is much calmer. And we're all able to have dialogues now. And even if I have my little moments of frustration or snap sometimes, I have the tools to go back and go, I'm really sorry I snapped. You really didn't deserve that. I was just frustrated because I was thinking about something else. We can have those repair conversations, which are really important to be able to do because, like we've said, everybody's going to get angry from time to time. So if we do have a moment, or even if my kids have their moments, we can come and talk about it afterwards and just have non-blaming, non-accusatory, better understanding of each other so that we can move forward and our connections are so much healthier. And there's such a more love I feel from them. I see how they're benefiting from the change in dynamics in our relationship. And so that's really been the best thing. That's the biggest reward for me.
I'm so glad to hear that. That makes me happy because that's, we talked a little bit about how even your children were like a mirror to you, showing you that
Yeah.
thing to work on, and to see that result happen today. That's
Yeah.
such a beautiful transformation.
Yeah, thank you. And even I'd say with, my relationships with all my family members. I mean, there was a lot of anger around with my parents growing up, and they're wonderful people, that I want to be so clear about. I adore them. But they're also humans. And so I've learned how to manage and release a lot of the stored anger and resentment I kind of built over the years around just their dynamics. So I can have much closer relationships with them, with my brother, even with my new husband. We can have conversations. I mean, we're both pretty reactive people. We have those tendencies, him and I. So in the beginning, actually, I felt a little regression. It was difficult because we kind of clashed a lot, but over the years, we've learned how to have those conversations and kind of navigate it with more productivity, positivity, and just and able to repair. So that's helped, relationships all around, I think. And as a result too, like I just find I walk around a lot more lighter, calmer, more empowered in myself. So, it brings great benefits. And even for those bad days, because like we all have them, I can have that self-compassion for myself. I cannot like push myself so far deep that I, think I'm this horrible person and just kind of wallow in those really dark spaces. I have the tools to lift myself up and move forward much more quickly.
I really love that. What would you share with somebody who is just starting this journey of wanting to work on their anger? And, my
Mm,
big one that you brought up today that I absolutely love is self-awareness. How
yeah.
would you guide somebody to take initial steps towards being more self-aware?
I would really start with the observation point. I actually made this little mini journal, which is basically like a checklist of like anytime you feel anger. If you can do it during, great. But afterwards, sit down and reflect like, what did I feel in my body? Because the physiological aspect of anger is actually very key. And it's been so interesting for me to learn about what happens in the brain when anger is triggered. And it is actually a biological reaction. And that's why it can feel like it takes you over and you have no control because your brain is being hijacked by the amygdala, which is the threat alarm center of the brain, and it takes over rational thought. So it's actually a physical reaction that takes about 30 to 60 minutes to fully flush itself from your body. So observation of those physical feelings to start the observation will allow you to start to tune in when those reactions start or are triggered so that you can go like, oh wow, my head is like pounding now. My chest is like my breath is racing. I feel like all shaky and like super energized. Okay, so like I'm starting to feel really angry. And that will help you slowly kind of move that ability to implement the new tools you learn earlier and earlier. So observation of physical reaction, observations of what were you thinking before you got angry? What was going on around you? What was going on in your head before that moment, it happened? Um, Also, what were you thinking during? And how did you feel afterwards? Did you feel like you overreacted? Did you say things you didn't like? How did you express it? What did you do? And really like documenting the process repeatedly. That observation will bring you your awareness because it'll put it in your, if you're being honest, it'll put it in your face. And then you can work with that. Then you can work with, the unmet expectations, unmet needs. This is, healthy communication, all those different categories, core wounds, because it really can even lead you back into your childhood. It often really does, because those unmet needs and those unmet expectations really are definitely linked to experiences in our past that were very painful, that we built up protective walls around. And then when something happens, doesn't have to be the same situation at all. It just makes us feel the same, it'll trigger the same kind of protective reaction, which comes out as anger.
That's beautifully said.
Yeah.
I love your
Thank you.
perspective on that. And I think becoming aware of your physiological state as you're going through these motions really is a big indicator for you. Because I always say that there's always a warning sign going on at some point. We just, a lot of times, people don't even realize this too, by the way. I read a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe
Oh,
Dispenza.
great
And
book.
he talked a lot about how, thoughts create feelings, which create emotions, which create
Yeah.
beliefs and convictions. He talked about this process that our brain goes through. And then he further went on to explain, he said, can you recall how many times you breathe every day? Can you think about every single time you took a breath, or how many times your heart beat every day, or in that 1 hour between 12 and 1
Yeah.
o'clock? Do you know how many times it did it? And he said the moral of the point is that our body a lot is on autopilot. It's
Mhm.
auto functioning itself. We don't have to think about how many times we breathe, how fast our heart goes, if our digestive tract is working. We don't have to think about all these things. Our body manages it for us. And
Yeah.
so he talked a lot about how, as you were talking about observation, sometimes these emotions are just on autopilot. We get angry without even knowing it or being aware of it. And we get to that explosive point where we go, oh, because now it's been big enough that we have to pay attention to it. Um, I wanted to ask you a powerful question about anger. So it's one I've never really gotten clear answers on, but I'm curious to learn your
Hope I
perspective.
can. Okay.
When we have those moments, because we all do, we're
Mhm.
human, we always
Yep.
get set off by something. How do you deal with that guilt and that shame or blame
Mhm.
towards yourself in that moment? What are some powerful bits of advice you would share with listeners who might
It's
experience
hard.
that?
Yeah, it's a big question that I've personally struggled with myself. It's been one of my biggest challenges, because grief and shame and guilt can really stick with you. It keeps you focused on the past. Um, Self-compassion really has to be the only thing that you can do. I think, at least for me, it's kind of been about acknowledging, okay, that's what it was. That's how I behaved. That's what I did. I can't change that, but I can, use that as motivation to change it for the future and learn how to, make my reactions better, learn more about myself, all of the work that's going to help us manage it, and bring more awareness, use it as the motivation rather than the anchor that holds you down and holds you back because it's super powerful. And I'm not, not saying that it's easy to move past. I again myself struggle with it on and off, although much less these days because I see the benefits and the positive changes I've reaped. So thankfully I can say like, okay, it was not great, but and I feel terrible about it, but I can't dwell on it because thankfully it's not like this anymore. I can't change it. And I'm doing better now. And I think that's maybe for anything in life when we're talking about regrets and remorse, that's all we really can do. Like, barring a time travel machine, which I would love to have one at sometimes, but like barring being able to go back and change it, there really isn't anything. So all you're doing is just keeping yourself in a very negative state about yourself. You're, damaging your self-esteem and your confidence also. You're maintaining negative mindsets, and it's not going to bring you anywhere positive.
Talia, I really love that bit about self-compassion because I think that
Yeah,
we've been wired by society when we get angry to beat ourselves up. And the funny story is, there's already other people out there doing that for us in that moment, believe it or
yeah,
not. So now it's like a double whammy on ourselves. And I do think, by the way, that pathway that society has trained us on creates beliefs and even creates convictions, and it creates people to create an identity of that they're angry people. I
yeah,
got told a lot growing up, most of my life, that I was an angry person. I was identified as an angry person, and I took on that belief. And it wasn't until probably the last 3 years of my life, to be very honest, that I actually sat back and said, I want to explore that really quickly. I was always
mm,
identified as anger, and I somehow took that on, meaning it wasn't my belief. Somebody else's belief got pushed on me. And
yeah,
then I created an identity or persona from that because that's what I was shown by the outside world. But
yeah,
I went to that place, like you talked about, as self compassion. I said, am I really angry? Am I really an angry person? Am I? Or, by the way, is a need of mine not being met? Am I in the wrong place with the wrong people? Am I in the wrong situation where I don't belong? Did I push a door that should have been closed? Did I do those things? I started
yeah,
to have that self compassion you're talking about. And I started realizing, by the way, I wasn't an angry person. Anger was the warning sign and the red flag that kept saying, you're in the wrong place. You're in the wrong spot with these people are not your people. It
yeah,
was always trying to tell me something and communicate something to me. And once I realized that, I lost that identity that I had. I lost it. I said,
it's
I'm
amazing.
not angry. I was in the wrong place in life. And anger kept trying to say, hey, wake up, man. You need to go over
This isn't
here.
working. Yeah,
And so that's when I started learning that anger really is a warning sign for us. It's not a negative thing, it's a good thing. It's trying to point you in a direction to keep you out of something that you just don't belong in. And
yeah.
so, to your point, self-compassion can be a huge motivating factor for people to not only work through their anger, by the way, but understand what it's trying to communicate, what it's trying to tell you, and redirect yourself because you have permission to guide your life. Nobody else does.
Absolutely. And it's not only sometimes not being in the right place, but sometimes it's alerting you to a hurt, or a pain that you're carrying within you that you might not even know. You've just incorporated it into who you are. We call those like the limiting beliefs or core wounds that you carry with you that there's just like it's an open injury to your heart that you've never actually healed and you almost shy away from because it's so painful. And so rather than facing it, you kind of you can shield it with anger, right? And just because you're trying to be protective. And so you don't want that hurt to either be exposed or tapped again or like no salt in the wound. So you keep it protected with a wall or a shield, all those terms that's fronted with anger. There's if you don't mind, I'll bring up two things. One, I wanted to go back
Mhm.
to when you said thoughts and feelings. So rumination, ruminating on negative thoughts is really a big part of also keeping yourself in a primed anger state. I've done it, do it, had to learn how to catch myself where some small thing might be bothering you and you can ruminate on it and focus on it. And even sometimes if it's in a relationship, create scenarios that aren't even necessarily realistic, but it's where you can justify your anger because you imagine something so bad happening that it allows your mind to explore that extreme anger. But all it's really doing is perpetuating that state. It's keeping your body primed, it's keeping your mind primed and your mindset, like your perspective, ready to see everything with the lens of being ready to be angry about it. So that's something we almost do to ourselves sometimes and have to catch and learn how to divert, or kind of push aside and reframe and refocus things. But the other thing I wanted to say, and of course now I lost it. What was the last thing I said before I brought up the two things? There was rumination and there was the other thing, and I was like, oh,
Uh,
I want to also bring
you
that
brought
up.
up thoughts and feelings you were talking about.
Yeah, that was the rumination point, but the last thing you just said, I apologize. We can move forward. It'll come back
That's
maybe.
okay.
It's okay.
No worries. I, I think ruminating is a big one. I struggled with a lot when I lost my kid because I went through some narcissistic
Mm,
abuse at that same time. And, I will say one of the biggest challenges since you brought this topic up, and I love it, by the way, is that can keep us caught in a fight or flight loop in our mind. And this is something
yeah,
I didn't learn until I went through it, by the way, but I want to make people aware of it. When you are ruminating, like Talia brought up, what's really going on up here is this big cycle loop. It's like you're on a treadmill that won't
yeah,
stop. And
yep,
and then it reinforces, by the way, all of your fears, all of your anger emotions, all of your needs not being met. It's like just a force fuel of anger going on up top.
yeah,
And what you have to understand at that point is you need self-compassion when you're ruminating. You need to be kind to yourself because that
yeah,
brain is so caught in fight or flight. It's primed, as Talia said. It's primed. It's looking for it.
yeah,
And I will say, by the way, and when you're in that state, by the way, and when the brain's looking for it, it will find it. I'll tell you that. And
yeah,
that may be somebody doing something just incredibly small and minuscule out in public one day, and you'll just lose it. And
yeah,
you'll be in that place feeling shame, but to be honest with yourself, I'll say instead of feeling shame, be compassionate to yourself. You were in that state. You were just caught in that loop, and that's a very normal thing. So be kind to yourself in that moment. That loop
yeah.
is there for a reason. A need's not being met. There's something not being processed. There's a warning sign going off that you're not listening to. So be kind to yourself if you ever feel that.
Yeah, what I've had to learn to practice because I would get really caught up in it and it would spark all the adrenaline through my system is once I had that awareness of being like you are going in the wrong direction. I used to kind of say, okay, fine, you get 5 more minutes to spend here in that loop, and then it's time to do something else. And once I started doing that, so I'm allowing myself to kind of like indulge in that whatever egotistical outrage, whatever it is, let it happen, and then okay, now we're done. Fine, I got my 5 minutes. It's time to shift. I remembered the other thing that I want to bring up is there's a great book out there called Taming Your Outer Child. And it talks to, it really addresses the topic of, core wounds, past experiences by Susan Anderson, I believe. And so her premise is we have our inner child, right? And that's where a lot of the unmet needs rest, the wounds around that, and maybe the limiting beliefs that we hold on to, like we're unlovable or we're not worthy, and we're not important. Those are those kind of things we hold on to that really, that's when you really dig deep. You find that that can be a really root cause of a lot of people's anger, um, impulses. But her concept is you have the inner child, which is really a young child. And then you have the outer child, which, if you can imagine, is a teenager, an angry, rebellious teenager. And that teenager is the embodiment of all the hurt that the inner child is harboring, but it's the protective wall. Like, consider, the inner child is the castle, and the outer child is that defensive wall around that's going to attack anybody who dares to come near that inner child because it wants to protect it at all costs because it is wounded and hurting. And so the her approach is to there's a lot of with inner child work, which I feel is very powerful to do if someone's ready to go there, because you visualize the inner child and what they're feeling then, and you visualize yourself as the adult coming to give the child you essentially what you never got or what was missing or what was unmet in those times. And it's a very inner experience. I've done it myself. I found it helped quite a lot, but you're working, you're your adult, you're your former teenager and your former child. And as you work with your inner child, that teenager, that outer child, that's the defensive wall that's ready to come out guns blazing against anybody who may come to hurt the inner child, starts to calm down and also starts to heal. So it's a really beautiful concept. I love it. I found it really resonated, and it really speaks to the issues of unmet needs, those inner beliefs that we identify with and then call our, walk around with as this is our new identity. I'm not lovable. Nobody cares about me. I'm not important. My feelings don't matter. Um, those are the kinds of deeper concepts I think that I find that come up.
I'm really glad you shared that because I got told similar advice a couple years back, and
Oh,
I really do believe I've been coaching a lot this year, and I've realized what you just said, by the way, is very true. I have
mhm.
had some clients that have gone through a lot of anger and grief, and oddly enough, what does come out is exactly what you just brought up, which is that our teenager, by the way, comes out in those moments, and we don't always
Mm,
see that, and so. I've coached people that are in their 50s, and what I see, by the way, is that hurt teenager. That's what I see. That one that
yeah,
didn't get their needs met, that one that got told these beliefs or these thoughts from other people and took it on as their own, but never really broke free of it. And so
yeah,
I really appreciate you bringing that up today on today's podcast because I want to encourage listeners if you do get angry, by the way, for whatever reason, I want you to take a split second in that moment to really think back in your teenage years in particular, whenever you had some kind of situation happen that made you really angry, sometime between 13 and 19. Think back on that and think about whatever that moment was that happened and think about, did that get resolved or how did I feel about it? Did it go unresolved? Did
yeah,
I become a certain person because of that moment? Ask yourself those things. And this is where I'm not saying this, by the way, to be judgmental. I'm saying this to make you
yeah,
aware. I'm saying
yep,
to give yourself some compassion because when you do find that moment, like Talia just brought up from that book, when you find that, by the way, it will shift you in so many ways. And it will actually, by the way, in a lot of terms, help cure anger in many facets because you'll learn how to be compassionate towards yourself.
yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, you can go even further back than that. When I started my inner child work with my coach, and at first I was like, what is this? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Imagine a child inside me. But they asked, like, what age do you see this child at? I found her at like 2, 3 years old inside, that's the state. And as I did my work, every time I kind of went back to her to address a new uh, wound or belief that I had, she slowly aged so that, that's a proof that the healing is working because that child can slowly feel safe enough to grow up within you and eventually meet you. But the thing is, all that work only you can give it to yourself. It's like, I mean, there's terms like reparenting, there's the inner child work, all of that, but like it's only you that can give that back to yourself, what wasn't, what you lacked or what hurt you, what was unmet within you. Only you now can give that back. It's not an external thing that can give it to you and heal it. You have to give it back to yourself. That's the really important thing. We're always seeking answers outside of ourselves. We're seeking solutions outside of ourselves. And yes, there are some, but really it's only us who can give it back to us.
That's
I
beautifully
think.
said, Talia. And as we wrap up the podcast, I think that's a beautiful way to end things is that
Thank you.
we have to learn how to give back to ourselves because when
Yeah.
we search in the outside world, I always call it an external control locus. You're going to always run into conflict and challenges and be upset. You're not going to get your needs met in many ways. It really does, like Talia said, it really does start with giving back to yourself. And that's where giving yourself that compassion to understand yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, your experiences, acknowledge yourself. I think there's so much power in that. So, Talia, I want to appreciate you sharing that as we wrap up
Thank
the
you.
podcast.
My pleasure. I've so enjoyed
uh,
this conversation. It's been wonderful.
I have too. I might have to bring you back for another episode. I feel like we could go
I'd love
deeper in a
it.
lot of ways.
Sure. Sure. I'd love it.
Um, so I wanted to ask you a couple questions as we wrap up. One of
Sure.
them is if you meet somebody going through grief or maybe somebody who's stuck in grief, what
Mm.
is one or two things you'd share with them to help them navigate that journey just a little easier?
Oh, grief. Yeah. Well, I would want to understand also what's the source of the grief, but to make I mean, it's back to the self-compassion is time, time awareness, I think, finding the things that bring you joy and holding on to them. And if you don't know what they are, then trying to find them and seek them out or learn what they are. I think we really, like we said before, the kind of the space where healing is where like almost nothing is happening. Because it's not that nothing's happening. What you're taking in, your brain is working on it in the subconscious, and it takes time to integrate. And only kind of when you're ready at a certain point, you'll be able to apply it. So I would give myself time, I would give myself comfort, I would give myself support and find the support around me, and just be gentle with myself, I think, with
I think that's
themselves.
a beautiful
Yeah.
message. I love that. And Talia, if people listen to this podcast episode and they
Mhm.
want to connect with you, where can they find you?
I'm mainly on Facebook and Instagram under Phoenix Rising Mentoring. You can also find me on my website, phoenixrisingmentoring.com. I've got a blog where I put out articles on a weekly basis, different aspects of anger and tips and insights. My email is info@phoenixrisingmentoring.com, but generally social messaging on the socials is really my main mode of communication. And yeah, I'm happy to talk to anyone who wants to reach out, like to
Awesome.
explore
Well,
more.
well, I was going to tell listeners, definitely go check out Talia when you get done listening to this podcast. If you guys go to the show notes in Apple or Spotify, you'll see all of her links there. You guys can find her on Facebook and Instagram, as she said, and I definitely recommend you reach out to her. She is a
Thank you.
wealth of knowledge in this area, and I know this is a topic of society that society is just like, don't talk about it. It sadly is one of the most powerful things, as you guys have heard with Talia's story today on the podcast, and it's helped her grow and become self-aware in so many ways. And you've gotten to hear, by the way, the results of her doing all that inner work and that self-reflection by understanding what anger was trying to communicate with her, what it was trying to tell her, and it guided her on this path now where she's able to help other people in very big ways. And so
Thank you.
um, I just want to say go check her out. She's an awesome person to connect with.
Thank you.
Talia, thank you so much for being a guest on today's episode. This was truly
My pleasure.
transformational and powerful.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure for me. And I just want to note on Facebook, I'm under Talya Pardo Ricardo. It's on Instagram that it's Phoenix Rising Mentoring. So just make sure that you can find me that way. But thank you so much. This has been a great joy. I love talking about these topics. I love exploring them. And I'd love to come back if that's ever an opportunity. But I really enjoyed today. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Talia. And I want to thank all of our listeners for joining Talia and I today on this episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Talia's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empowergriefjourney.com and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on Apple and Spotify. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.